Okay, because it's time, so I'm not going to waste. Okay, two more people. Done. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Professor Roshee from Kathmandu University. She is a gem, that's what I can say. And she is actually, humble enough to agree about today's webinar. And she is going to speak about a couple of, beautiful concept on the marketing aspect, what can be done in post-COVID and what can be done during the developing countries, how developing countries can understand how to go into the next level of boom boosting. So over to you, Roshee, and I'm going to put myself in mute mode, and for the sake of the webinar, I'll ask everyone to please turn off their microphone, and we are good to go. So 1, 2, 3, good to go, Roshee.
Namaste and a very good evening to you all. First of all, I should start by thanking Arijit Ji for this wonderful opportunity, for letting me share some of my thoughts on the area of marketing and branding. I am Roshee Lamichhane, and I work as an assistant professor of marketing. For today's topic, there have been a lot of webinars going around in the theme of marketing and branding lately, post-COVID. But today's discussion of my topic would be focused more about marketing and branding, but for developing economies, post-COVID. And in doing so, I made an attempt and tried to analyze the phenomena based on from some kind of human angle or philosophical perspective, going beyond the traditional notion of marketing and branding. The reason being, I tell you, the developing nations or economies are fraught with some structural and institutional challenges, such as the variability in terms of the purchasing power and the limited organized market. And therefore, the channels, the context, the strategies, and the target audience may not be very similar to those that we find in a developing economy. And this is more so when we are all on the downside of the wheel of a business cycle. And therefore, to talk on this topic, I kind of gathered some data on the global front and the South Asian context, so that the discussion is going to be relevant while talking about the marketing and branding challenges for developing economies like ours. And today I would like to organize my discussion centering around basically on three themes, where I would be talking about digital access and digital divide. Then I would talk about challenges and difficulties and opportunities in digital marketing. And lastly, on the changed consumer behavior or the altered consumer behavior pattern. And in structuring my presentation, I have taken help of a PPT. I promise I won't bore you with that. It's just a few PPTs just to structure my talk. So I'll be sharing that and taking it forward. So moving ahead, in the context of marketing and branding, given the COVID that we are all facing, the challenge right now, all kind of marketing activities, whether it be of products and services, this is going to be undergoing a very big sea change, as they're going to be an inescapable aspects of broader economic context, ebb and flow in the business cycle. And therefore, the traditional brick and mortar market transactions might be very less in vogue, and that would call for newer business designs and models, and that's going to be required to be more viable and sustainable. And the brunt is definitely going to be felt more by developing economies. I tell that because the recent riot in France has brought forward to the forefront the huge divide between the haves and haves not. And when you talk about a developed economy like that, it's very much natural that the glaring divide or the dichotomy of economic inequality is going to be more pronounced in economies like ours. And one of the compelling reason for this paradigm shift is definitely going to be the income and wealth disparity. And this is going to be largely aggravated by the current pandemic. So therefore, we need to take a comprehensive view, a global view, as because the entire global economic structure and the economies of all the countries are going to be required to catch up and settle down for this new normal. And that's becoming a buzzword now. The structure and the dynamics within the market. Now, both for developed and the developing economies are set to alter dramatically. And that is, again, I'm repeating, it's going to be propelled by the inequalities in income and wealth across the globe and the resultant reactions of the masses to the new paradigm. And these phenomena would ultimately guide, define, and decide the kind of marketing and branding initiative that's going to be taking place at the marketplace. Therefore, adaptation and customization of strategies and expectations are going to be inevitable given the dichotomy of economic inequality. As I said earlier, also, it's going to be very much pronounced in developing economies. I would take help of some figures to explain this in the later slides. Now, what should be the phase of marketing and branding in the upcoming time? Because the kind of experience we've had during and post-pandemic, marketing generally, I think, should be revolving around three distinct set of themes. The first set, which will continue to be the conventional marketing, which is purely aimed at product promotion and sales, and that's going to be essential for goods like health, hygiene, food and grocery items for the business sustenance. The other set would be the second set, especially for economies like Nepal, which would take on a societal marketing perspective. And that would relate to the welfare schemes and all other kinds of marketing practices, essentially for non-profit making. And this would comprise the CSR component of big business houses, where they should be able to construct more human face of more even and benign profit making exercise, and especially because the times are so extraordinarily different. And lastly, the third set, which is going to be primarily related to the marketing of services. I say this because the service sector is going to comprise a huge percentage of the GDP, and that's going to be increasing over the years. I take some data across economies like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and India, Pakistan, where the GDP, the service sector contribution to the GDP ranges from 51 to 61%. That's the latest figure. And as we have also experienced, some of these service sectors like health, ICT, and education has presented better prospect even during the pandemic times. And therefore, these sectors have better scope for more marketing and branding exercises in the near future. So I talk about some kind of strategies and approaches that would be for the new normal. So this kind of hiccups that we're experiencing will definitely not change the cardinal principles and practices of marketing. And therefore, the science and art of marketing and branding would continue to enjoy the relevance. But most important to note is that the strategists should recognize the pronounced wealth and income disparity. For instance, I quote that a mere 7% of the total population in South Asia own 70% of the wealth. And that's a disproportionately very huge gap. And this mandates a bold departure in terms of the means and methods of marketing and branding according to the kind of new emerging reality that we're going to come across. Challenges do exist, as I said, particularly in developing economies, because there are issues with digital literacy and connectivity infrastructure. So as I said, the first theme of my talk, I would talk about the digital divide and the digital access. And as I said earlier also, the service sector contribution is larger than the contribution from the agriculture and industry compared to all these developing economies, as I present in the picture, in the figure there. Besides that, the other data that we need to perhaps look into is the internet penetration across countries, ranging from the lowest being Pakistan at 32 and the highest is Bangladesh at 57. And India is 41 and we are at 56. But the interesting point here that's to be noted is the productive use of connectivity, which is still largely missing in developing economies like ours. Internet is being consumed, but it's not being productively used. There's another figure on the total online sales percentage of the total retail sales across economies like ours and the developed ones, and across the global one also. When I say this, the latest 2019 figure given by World Bank, India had 1.6% of share, whereas Bangladesh had 0.7% share of the total online sale in the retail sector, whereas China stood at 15% online sales, and global the number is 14%. So this also talks about the digital divide that exists across the developing and the developed economies. It has also brought out a picture that explains the differences. And that's the last part on the data side of it. I just put in across some data how the digital access is improving in the global front, and try to compare some of it in the context of Nepal. So definitely the number of internet users are going to be increasing across globally at 60%. 4.5 billion people are using internet, and 3.8 billion using social media. Another 5.19 billion using mobile users, using mobiles. So all these percentages have been increasing. The numbers have been increasing across over the years. And in Nepal also, more so after the lockdown, what we've experienced is from the internet service providers, the internet bandwidth requirement has been increased by 30%, and the YouTube usage has increased tremendously, almost in double, from 34% to 60 in 2020. Likewise, the total internet consumption has gone by 50%. In terms of numbers, if you see, there are like 2.5 million users in Nepal have increased in the last 6 months, ending February 2020. And in the period of lockdown, there have been a significant increase in the number of e-retailing companies. So there were some like 700 orders per day by one of the e-retailing companies here. So this shows that the world and our developing economy like ours is gradually moving towards a digital economy, and that is facilitated by the ease, access, and acceptability of these online platform that's available. There's another data by World Economic Forum on the online classes, online teaching learning, because education happens to be in the service sector. So that is largely across the world, it's 77%. But I had come across a recent data for Nepal, which showed that only 30% of people could afford the online learning in the master's level. And the reason being, most of them could not afford internet. So that's again a stark contrast between the developed and developing economy like ours. Having said this, talking about the differences in terms of how the world at large and how developing economies are moving, I would also like to present some opportunities that COVID had brought forward. It has definitely put forward a plethora of opportunities in making digital access a reality. But having said this, the challenges also loom large. Though we are in a position to leverage and unleash the full potential of e-commerce, given that we can get away with some of the structural hurdles, like with regard to net connectivity, IT, uh, digitization, payment restrictions, logistical challenges. If we can get rid of some of these, and more so the issues are in economies like Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Nepal, if we can get rid of some of these structural challenges, probably we would be in a better position to improve upon the opportunity that's going to be afforded by digital marketing. And another beautiful fact is that 28% of people, or the population in this area, is younger than 15 uh, years of age, and these are the people who are going to be the future consumers, future entrepreneurs, and who are going to be more tech savvy, and that's going to be um, a, 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 an optimistic outlook for economies like ours. Um, so moving forward, in terms of the trends, now what has uh, COVID, how has COVID changed the behavioral pattern or alter the behavioral patterns of the consumer? As you have noticed or we have experienced, no, every single walk of life have been affected by the pandemic, this unprecedented pandemic. So therefore, the dynamics of demand is definitely going to be altered in the short run, at least. And job losses, both in the organized and unorganized sector, is going to be forcing people to at least adopt self-austerity measures for the time being, at least. Consumption is definitely going to slow down, and this is going to usher new kinds of consumer attitude and behavior, the current economic conditions. And as we have seen, the context again being the developing economy, there have been a lot of tendencies on panic buying of essentials, like more on the hoarding part of it. The consumers trying to hoard a lot of commodities, more to do with essentials. And that is because of the risk aversion psychology. They would not like to pay more on a later date, so they're trying to hoard more goods. And similarly, crowding to compensate the sense of loss of shopping during the lockdown period. And that's another trait known as the psychological ownership. You feel good if you are in control or hold of goods. And therefore, in developing economies like ours, that we've had witnessed the short supply even for the basic commodities, and that has and will keep happening. This kind of panic behavior, panic buying in the short run, and especially if the consumers are going to speculate some kind of price hike, that could be another propellant for extra buying in the immediate run also. Whereas, as you could see, it would take some more time for consumers to reinstill their confidence. And therefore, for other items like durables and luxuries, or for conspicuous consumption, consumers will definitely exhibit a wait and watch attitude. They're going to wait for some more time. Things, till the time things are going to be normal. So the whole focus, as we have been focusing on the context of developing economies, given the kind of dramatic shift that we're going to observe in consumer psychology, and as the purchasing power of consumers are going to be plummeting, the very scope of marketing and branding is going to be shrinking drastically. And it would be only resorting to essentially to sense, serve, and satisfy human hunger. And that's where it is in this change marketing context that we may have to redefine hunger marketing in itself. Marketers in the change scenario, they would have to now conceptualize, define, develop, and deliver brands that the masses can afford to buy and get value in terms of the utility, satisfaction, and welfare. And the challenge for the marketers, I would see, is to make their marketplace more inclusive, where the products and the services have better access to those who are going to be less fortunate. And and for the more marginalized group to have a wider range of choices. And this, I think, would be the harbinger and precursor for the new normal that one is going to definitely witness in the post-COVID scenario. So with this, I kind of end my slides. I think I didn't want to bore you or occupy you for a very long time with my slides. Probably we could utilize this time for interactions on the area. And thank you once again for the opportunity. And I would also like to take some inputs from you all on your thoughts on this particular aspect, on how I kind of philosophize the whole idea about how marketing and branding is going to be looked at from a very different angle and perspective, and not in the traditional lens of marketing and branding in general.
Super presentation, Roshee madam. Really, really, encouraging one, and it's beautiful on time. So I'll request the participants to ask their due questions, and you can raise your hand in the chat box and then ask the question. You can turn off your unmute button and maybe raise a hand. I can unmute you. And ma'am, if you can just turn off your screen
Okay.
share. Yeah.
Stop share maybe.
Yes, stop share. That's it. Thank you so much. Yes. Okay. So I've got first question from Mr. Shantan Roy. Okay, he's just thanking you, ma'am. Shumanta Bose. Sumanta Bose is asking that he is pursuing MBA from a reputed institute here in Calcutta called UEM. His question is, the economy may face a recession because the recession consumer try to save more due to lack of effective demand. How can the garment sector, basically fashionable clothes and luxury goods, hold on. Okay, so yeah, so basically the fashionable clothes and luxury goods promote their brands on post-COVID situation. Did you get the question?
Okay, can I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so the context, whatever examples I would like to share is going to be in the context of our developing economies like ours. And the reason why I choose to talk on this is because if we look into the perspective of marketing branding from a developed economy notion, would be a little different from how we as developing economies are going to suffer, at least for the time being. Because if you talk about government roles, probably our government may not be in a position to support us in a huge way, and therefore it calls for the ingenuity and creativity of the marketers as to how they are going to keep themselves sustained even in these challenging times. And as your question was directed towards luxury goods, from what I can fathom and what I can share is, uh, given the change conditions, as we've all observed, as the GDP growth, the predicted GDP growth has been significantly coming down, we as customers are going to be at least risk averse for the time being. And the focus on today is going to be on the essentials. Like now the focus of customers are going to be on nutrition, on health, on hygiene, on sanitation. Who People may not really care about luxury at the moment, at least. And no, and that's where the whole concept of branding and marketing has been reduced to empathizing with the consumer needs, because the new consumer needs are growing up. I mean, there were needs that did not exist in the market before. There is a bigger need to feel secure. There is a bigger need to think that I am in no longer some kind of threat from any other stranger. Now, any stranger that you come across, you might think him or her as a potential carrier. So this is the kind of mindset that we're living in. So forget about luxuries and comforts for the time being. Just think how we all can sustain and survive, at least, and live healthily in the short run. And probably the brands that is going to be more directed towards luxuries are going to be definitely thinking more in terms of how they can convert themselves from into more on sustainable lines, because people are going to more value value about sustenance, about nature, no more into conspicuous consumption. So I think that's how the entire branding and slogan and the marketing communication of those luxury brands, fashion brands, should come forward in these kind of challenging times.
Super. So, ma'am, I have got another question from UKC. So, give me a second. I need to manage the window. We are bombarded with questions, but yes. So, UKC is saying, great professional talk. How would the new normal bring in new marketing practices? Maybe 2 or 3 highlights.
New normal. Yes, I mean that's been a buzzword recently. I think, given the new normal, and our changed perspective as a consumer, the kind of changed perception and attitude towards everything from buying to consuming. Right now, it is a time we've got for all of us as consumers and marketers that we have time to reflect on, think about things that are going to be more valuable to us in terms of consumption, taking more care of our health. Um, like I talk about the need for nutritious food, nutrition, sanitization, hygiene is becoming the primary focus of individuals. So in the context of the new normal, for the brands to stay relevant, I think one, they should realize that this is going to be going on for at least an extended period of time, because things are very uncertain, at least till a vaccine is ready. The things are not going to go back to normalcy very soon. So it's a period of extended crisis marketing, and marketers have to understand that, and probably they should come up with creative strategies as to how they would still be able to communicate in terms of not being very aggressive, but also telling that they still care about their consumers. So they need to focus on more value-oriented messaging. They need to focus on um uh, value-oriented and more on content marketing, which would focus on the fact that they're empathizing with the customer. And it's not about the external customers alone. It's also about your own internal customers, your own employees, and your other people in the stakeholder, like your suppliers, your vendors. You keep telling them that you care for each of them, and you come up with more innovative strategies, more so because we are talking about marketing for the bottom of the pyramid segment in developing economies. So try and become more innovative, perhaps. I was reading this example of a brand called Kevin Care. They decided to come up with what do you call this, sachet sanitizers. And imagine a brand that would sell sachet shampoos are getting into making forays into sanitizers. And that's such a wonderful concept, and which is not for a one-time use. Probably there's going to be lead, at least it's going to work for a couple of times, because you cannot expect a consumer to carry a full bottle of sanitizer and, keep traveling. So, I mean, I think this crisis is going to definitely afford a very big opportunity for marketers to be innovative. And I think, therefore, having realized that this is going to be a new normal, at least for some more time, it's important for the marketers to keep innovating, keep experimenting, and keep trying. Because that's the only way forward.
Super, super. So I've got another comment from Mr. Shujit. He's saying hi from Bangladesh. And then to the next question, Mr. Prashanjit is asking that non-essential items need a deeper connection with consumer for survival post-COVID. So do you have any particular branding strategy which you want to share with us?
For non-essentials, yes, as I said, essentials anyway going to be there for sustenance. So maybe brands do not have to work really hard, and they can just talk about, they can still go aggressive. They can keep telling what are the services that they're going to provide. But for non-essentials, rightly said so, it's going to be a little more tricky, because one side you still have the challenge to to ensure that you are in the minds of the consumers and you still there. You don't want your consumers to forget you because of the crisis. So you keep communicating, but the communicating has to be more subtle and more nuanced, rather than going very aggressive. So there would not be any definitive strategies as such, because I mean, nobody knows what is going to happen, and it's all uncharted territory that we are moving forward. And we don't know how the future is going to look like, how the consumers are going to behave. Now, for example, there are news like some restaurants reopening. So even in the reopen scenario, how hesitant will the consumer be walking into a restaurant or getting into a movie hall or going or for shopping. So things like that is also going to determine how people are going to look for non-essential brands. So the best thing for a brand which is going to be of serving the non-basic products or services, I think for them the best thing to do would be focusing on more on cause-based marketing. Like they realize the option right now is not about trying to make more sales, definitely not trying to sound irritating to the consumers, but keep your consumers informed. Let them know that you are there for them. For example, this was an wonderful initiative by Mahindra, where they decided to what do you call talk about the Corona warriors. Like they're giving their own vehicles and they're saying how important the Corona warriors are going to be
Ma'am,
for us. So maybe
our beloved Professor Ujjwal Roy Chaudhary, I want to speak to you directly. He's raising hand. Over to you, Professor.
No, I just wanted to, the good examples are given on the non-essential. I just wanted to say that non-essential products could move to new marketing strategies. Like, for example, a cinema not finding a theater hall could move to online streaming of cinema on payment. And
OTT.
if the cinema has the right story and the right stars and the right positioning and digitally marketed well, will find a market and sales even online. Or for example, a liquor brand which would not be finding events where liquor can be promoted can actually take cause marketing route. For every bottle of a certain alcoholic brand sold, a certain amount of money goes for this purpose. So she has just now talked about the cause marketing. Actually, a very good erudite. In fact, it was almost like an MBA class. Thank you for the talk.
okay.
Super. Roshee ma'am, I would love to, add something in this context. There was a movie which was created, I think, around 2 years back called Niranjana. It's in Bengali. They couldn't release it in the theater hall because of their marketing budget. And we became their gaming partner. So we created the game out of the whole movie concept itself. So we started doing the marketing. You know what happened during COVID-19? They are going to release this movie in OTT platform, and we got number of boosting into the digital platform. So we boosted whole thing, and they are getting a lot of mileage during this COVID time. Rightly said by Professor, it's actually happening. So most probably
Very
we
good.
will
That's
have,
a good example. That's a very good example.
yeah. So most probably we have a lot of other consumer behavior. So I had another speaker from Iceland actually. So we collaborated into digitization of music. So we started distributing the whole musical concept using digital platform, and people started consuming it. So most probably we'll have one more question. Sorry, I need to stop myself. One last question. I'm really sorry. I'm getting a lot of personal question in my personal chat. Due to time, I need to stop, and please pardon me about the participants who are waiting in the waiting room. Can't add you at this last hour. Last question from Vedansh. Vedansh is asking, is there any possibility that agriculture also can be stopped because of rapid spread of COVID-19? Not sure. Okay, you want to take that question?
Agriculture, it cannot be stopped. I mean, we all need to eat. But one thing, I can share an initiative from Nepal itself. It's called Muna Enterprise. It's an initiative by the government and NRN, non-resident Nepalis, where they've started the phytosanitization of agriculture products, because people, as I said, the people are living in this fear mindset. So if at all, if they get to know that the vegetables that they're consuming or the fruit that they're consuming is going to be sanitized. It's very healthy. If there could be some kind of tag where a consumer, after seeing the packed vegetable and fruits, are going to be so convinced that if it is sanitized, my health is going to be taken care of. It's COVID free. So I think that's where the agriculture and the supply chain, the whole supply chain has to be moving forward. And I think that's where the whole role of marketers and brand people are going to come in. I mean, just a simple thing, but then agriculture makes a huge difference.
True, true. With this note, thank you so much, ma'am Roshee. We
Thank
loved
you.
your
It was,
presentation, beautifully articulated, and thank you, participants, for all the questions. And please pardon me if I can, if I cannot add you in the discussion, because you are trying to add after around 20-25 minutes. No point to adding you and get a lot of questions. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned. Madam will be soon with us with another live session. And thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
yes, thank you so much. If you have any queries, you can send it to my personal email as well.
Sure.
My email is lamroshee@gmail.com. So any question that could not be entertained, I would love to hear it on my email. Thank you once again. Namaste.
Thank you.